the truth that has been hidden for far too long. The powerful role of black people in the Bible has been overlooked or misrepresented. But today, right now, we are bringing that truth to light. You need to understand that the Bible is not just a book for one race. It's for all people, for all cultures, and yes, black people are integral to this story. Get ready, because I'm about to drop some knowledge that will elevate your faith, pride, and understanding. 1. Moses, an African leader chosen by God. Moses, one of the most revered figures in biblical history, is often remembered as a leader who liberated the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But there's a vital truth we often overlook. Moses was African, born in Egypt, a land steeped in African culture and history. Moses was raised in the heart of African civilization. He wasn't just a foreigner in Egypt, he was part of the fabric of this powerful, ancient nation. Raised in Pharaoh's household by Pharaoh's daughter, Moses grew up in the splendor of Egyptian royalty. He was shaped by the African world that surrounded him, yet God had a different plan for him, one that would change the course of history. Moses was chosen by God not just because of his background, but because of his heart. God saw in him the potential to lead an entire nation to freedom. When Moses was called by God through the burning bush, he was reluctant. He didn't feel qualified. But God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. And Moses' African roots didn't disqualify him. They equipped him with a unique perspective, strength, and resilience that were essential for the mission ahead. The fact that Moses, an African man, was chosen to free the Israelites speaks volumes about God's power to transcend race, culture, and nationality. It shows that God doesn't judge by external appearances, but sees the heart and potential of a person. Moses' story demonstrates how God uses people from all walks of life, regardless of their race or background, to accomplish his will. Moses' leadership was not just about being the one who parted the Red Sea or received the Ten Commandments. It was about his ability to stand up for justice, to be the voice of the oppressed, and to lead a people out of bondage. His African heritage played a pivotal role in shaping the boldness and courage he needed to face Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites. Moses' story isn't just one of liberation. It's a story of empowerment, of God using a man from Africa to change the world forever. Moses' African identity isn't just an interesting historical footnote. It is a testament to the fact that God's work transcends borders and cultures. It reminds us that God's plan is vast, and his chosen ones can come from any corner of the earth. Just like Moses, no matter where we come from, we are all part of a divine purpose. 2. The Queen of Sheba, a powerful African ruler. The Queen of Sheba stands as one of the most powerful and influential figures in the Bible, a woman who came from the heart of Africa, Ethiopia. Her story is a testament to African excellence, wisdom, and leadership. The Queen of Sheba wasn't just a ruler. She was a queen who understood the value of knowledge and had the courage to seek it out. She wasn't satisfied with simply ruling her own land. She sought to broaden her understanding of the world. And her journey took her all the way to Israel, where she encountered King Solomon. In the biblical account, the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's legendary wisdom and wealth, and decided to test him with a series of hard questions. This wasn't a queen seeking just any kind of knowledge. She sought wisdom, and she knew that it was worth a journey to gain it. She traveled across deserts, enduring hardships, because she understood that true greatness requires effort and sacrifice. The Queen of Sheba's visit wasn't just about the exchange of gifts and wealth. It was about a meeting of minds, a coming together of cultures to share wisdom and experiences. When she arrived, Solomon answered all her questions, and the Bible tells us that she was overwhelmed by his wisdom, the prosperity of his kingdom, and the blessings that God had bestowed upon him. But what's truly remarkable is the queen's reaction. She acknowledged God as the ultimate source of Solomon's wisdom and greatness. Her journey wasn't just a political or economic mission. It was a spiritual one. She recognized the hand of God and the wisdom and success of the king of Israel, and she worshiped the God of Israel as a result. The Queen of Sheba's story is so much more than an interaction between two rulers. It's a reflection of African strength, intelligence, and influence in a world that often disregarded or minimized the contributions of African peoples. She showed that African women could lead, could seek knowledge, and could wield power. Her legacy is one of wisdom, strength, and spiritual openness, qualities that still resonate with us today. Her story is an invitation to honor wisdom, to seek knowledge wherever it may be found, and to understand that true greatness comes from recognizing God's hand in all that we achieve. The Queen of Sheba wasn't just a ruler of Ethiopia, she was a ruler in her own right, showing the world the power and brilliance of African leadership. 3. Simon of Cyrene, a black man who helped carry Jesus' cross. Simon of Cyrene is a figure in the Bible who may not be as widely recognized, but his role in the story of Jesus is incredibly significant. He is the man who helped Jesus carry the cross on the way to his crucifixion. Simon was a black man from Cyrene, an ancient city located in what is now modern-day Libya, North Africa. This small detail in the story holds deep meaning, as it highlights the presence and involvement of African people in the most pivotal moment in Christian history. Imagine the scene: Jesus, having been beaten and weakened, struggles to carry the heavy cross up to Golgotha, where he would be crucified. In his moment of suffering, the Roman soldiers, seeing that he could no longer bear the weight, seized Simon of Cyrene from the crowd and command him to carry the cross. What strikes us about this moment is that Simon didn't hesitate. He didn't shrink from the burden placed on him. He stepped up. In that act, Simon became a part of the greatest story ever told. Though Simon was compelled to help Jesus, his involvement in carrying the cross is deeply symbolic. In the midst of Jesus' suffering, a black man was chosen to assist, showing that God's plan encompasses all people, all races, and all nations. Simon of Cyrene was not just a random passerby, he played a significant role in the story of the crucifixion. In fact, the Gospel of Mark mentions Simon's sons, Alexander and Rufus, suggesting that Simon's family was known and respected in the early Christian community. His act of service became more than just a physical act. It became a spiritual legacy, showing how anyone, regardless of background, can play a part in God's plan. When we think of Simon of Cyrene, we're reminded that sometimes we are called to carry burdens we didn't expect. Sometimes the path we're given seems too heavy to bear. But like Simon, we must be willing to take up our crosses, to help carry the weight when it feels like we can't go any further. We are also reminded that African people have always been part of God's redemptive story. Just as Simon's contribution was essential, so too is the legacy of African influence woven throughout the Bible. Simon's story reminds us that we are all called to serve, to take up our own crosses, and to be a part of something greater than ourselves. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Simon was simply in the right place at the right time, and through his obedience he became a part of the greatest act of love the world has ever known. 4. The Ethiopian eunuch, first to hear the gospel in Africa. The story of the Ethiopian eunuchs in the Bible is a powerful testament to the inclusivity of God's message and the global reach of the gospel. The Ethiopian eunuch, a high-ranking official from Ethiopia, is mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 8, as one of the first people from Africa to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. His story represents the breaking down of racial, cultural, and geographical barriers in God's kingdom, showing that the message of salvation was always meant for all people, regardless of their background. The eunuch was a man of authority, a treasurer for the Queen of Ethiopia, which shows his importance within his country. He had traveled all the way to Jerusalem to worship, yet he was still searching for deeper truth. As he journeyed back home, He was reading from the book of Isaiah but couldn't understand what he was reading. This is when Philip, a disciple of Jesus, was led by the Holy Spirit to approach the eunuch and explain the meaning of the scriptures. Philip shared the good news about Jesus Christ, and in that moment, the eunuch's heart was open to the gospel. The significance of this encounter cannot be overstated. The Ethiopian eunuch was one of the first people to be introduced to the message of Christ outside of the Jewish community. This was a groundbreaking moment in the early church. The message of salvation was no longer confined to the Jews. It was reaching beyond to the African continent, to a man who was both an outsider and a high-ranking official in a powerful African kingdom. What's even more remarkable is that after hearing the gospel and being baptized by Philip, the Ethiopian eunuch was filled with joy. He immediately embraced the message of Christ, becoming a living testimony of the spread of the gospel. His acceptance and belief marked the beginning of Christianity's expansion into Africa, which would later grow to become one of the most powerful centers of Christianity in the world. The story of the Ethiopian eunuch shows us that God's love is not bound by ethnicity, social status, or geography. The gospel is for all nations, and the Ethiopian eunuch became a symbol of the inclusivity of God's kingdom. His story reminds us that Africa was always a part of God's redemptive plan, and that the African church has deep roots in the foundation of Christianity. It also calls us to never stop seeking the truth. For when we do, God will send the right people into our lives to help us understand, just as he did with the eunuch and Philip. 5. Ham, the father of African nations. Ham, the son of Noah, is one of the most significant biblical figures whose legacy has often been misunderstood, yet it holds profound meaning for the African people. Ham was one of Noah's 3 sons, and after the great flood, he became the father of several nations, many of which were located in Africa. In the Bible, Ham's descendants are the founders of various African tribes and nations, a pivotal role in the history of the African continent. Ham's sons were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And these names are associated with some of the most powerful and historically significant regions of Africa and the Middle East. Cush is believed to have founded the kingdom of Ethiopia. Cush, one of the oldest and most influential African civilizations. Mizraim is commonly associated with Egypt, one of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in ancient history. Phut is often linked to the North African nations, such as Libya, and Canaan is connected to the ancient Canaanite civilizations in the area surrounding modern-day Israel and Palestine. The role of Ham in the Bible is essential because it demonstrates that Africa has always been an integral part of God's plan. It was through Ham's descendants that the African nations came into being. These nations would go on to shape the history of the world, from ancient kingdoms to modern nations, through contributions to culture, science, religion, and governance. Ham's legacy is a powerful reminder of the biblical connection between Africa and the kingdom of God. His descendants weren't just incidental characters in the biblical narrative, they were foundational to the development of God's creation. The Bible emphasizes that all nations, including those of African descent, have a part in God's great plan for humanity. Ham, as the father of these nations, serves as a reminder that Africa's influence and contributions are rooted in the earliest moments of the biblical story. Throughout history, African civilizations such as Egypt, Ethiopia, and others that descended from Ham's lineage have been centers of wisdom, culture, and spirituality. Egypt, for example, was not just a land of pyramids, it was a land of great knowledge, mathematics, and art. The African nations were vital to the biblical story, with figures like Moses, the Queen of Sheba, and even Jesus, who traveled to and interacted with these regions. Ham's story tells us that Africa's role in God's plan has always been significant. It serves as a reminder that African heritage is a part of a broader divine narrative, and that the legacy of African nations is one of great honor and importance. It calls us to recognize the value of African contributions to both the Bible and world history. Just as Ham's descendants helped shape the world, so too do the descendants of Africa continue to play an essential role in God's ongoing work. 6. Zipporah, a strong woman who protected her family. Zipporah, the wife of Moses, is a remarkable figure in the Bible whose story often goes underappreciated but is a powerful testament to courage, wisdom, and strength. She was the daughter of Jethro, a priest of Midian, and her story intertwines with Moses' life at a critical moment, illustrating her as a woman who stepped up in the face of danger and protected her family in ways that changed the course of history. Zipporah's strength is first evident when Moses, after fleeing Egypt, comes to the land of Midian. He meets Zipporah while helping her and her sisters water their flock, and this marks the beginning of their marriage. But it's not just her gentle nature as a wife that makes Zipporah significant, it's her actions during a life-threatening situation that demonstrate the strength she possessed. The Bible recounts an episode in Exodus 4 where Moses, on his way back to Egypt to lead the Israelites to freedom, is nearly struck down by God. The text doesn't provide many details, but it's clear that Moses' life was at risk due to an apparent failure to perform the act of circumcising his son, a vital between God and his people. In a bold and swift act, Zipporah, realizing the gravity of the situation, took it upon herself to circumcise her son and save Moses' life. Her quick thinking and courage in that moment ensured the mission would continue and that Moses could fulfill his divine calling. This action was not only one of protection, but also demonstrated Zipporah's deep understanding of God's law and her willingness to make difficult decisions for the sake of her family's well-being. Zipporah's role as a strong protector is often overlooked, but in reality, her actions were crucial in the continuation of Moses' mission. She was a bold woman of faith, unafraid to act decisively when faced with a challenge, and this trait was a key aspect of her character. Her protection of Moses and their son shows that strength comes in many forms, not just physical might, but in quick thinking, courage, and wise decision-making in moments of crisis. In a world that often underestimates the value of women, Zipporah's story stands as a testament to the strength of women, especially in times when the weight of leadership and responsibility often falls on their shoulders. She was a strong woman who protected her family, ensured that God's plan continued, and demonstrated the power of wisdom and courage in the most unexpected of circumstances. Zipporah's example reminds us that sometimes the unsung heroes in the Bible were the ones whose courage and wisdom make all the difference in fulfilling God's purpose. 7. Solomon's kingdom, a global power with African influence. King Solomon, the son of David, is one of the most famous rulers in biblical history. His reign marked a golden age for Israel, and his kingdom became a powerful and influential state in the ancient world. What is often overlooked, however, is the strong African influence on Solomon's kingdom, particularly through his interactions with the African world, which played a significant role in his wealth, wisdom, and international prominence. The Bible tells us that Solomon's kingdom was one of prosperity and peace. His reign was marked by flourishing trade, monumental building projects, and great wisdom that attracted people from all over the world. Solomon's most famous interaction was with the Queen of Sheba, an African queen from the region of Ethiopia, who traveled to Jerusalem to test Solomon's wisdom with difficult questions. When she arrived and witnessed the splendor of Solomon's court and heard his profound answers, she was amazed and declared that the half of his wisdom and wealth had not been told to her. Her visit symbolized the strong diplomatic and cultural ties between Israel and African nations at that time. Solomon's alliance with the Queen of Sheba didn't stop with just a meeting of minds that led to economic exchanges and even political alliances. The Queen of Sheba's visit resulted in the exchange of gifts, knowledge, and resources, further solidifying the strong relationships between Israel and Africa. This partnership exemplified how African influence was integral to the success of Solomon's reign, especially in terms of trade and wisdom. Solomon's trade routes spanned far beyond the borders of Israel, extending into Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and beyond. He formed alliances with various African kingdoms, and his wealth was partly due to the flow of precious goods such as gold, spices, and exotic animals. The African kingdoms were not merely recipients of Solomon's wisdom and riches, they were partners in creating a flourishing, interconnected world. In addition, Solomon's reign was also characterized by spiritual wisdom, as he built the temple in Jerusalem, solidifying his position as a spiritual leader, not just a political one. His understanding of the world was vast, and he embraced the cultures around him, recognizing the value of cross-cultural exchange. Solomon's kingdom is a powerful reminder of the global reach of Israel during his reign, with significant African contributions shaping the prosperity and success of his empire. The influence of African kingdoms like Sheba was a critical part of Israel's greatness, demonstrating the essential role Africa played in the biblical narrative.